Good evening, ladies and menfolk. Welcome to episode 60 of Word Ninjas Live, our first Wednesday night episode. Hooray!
Yay!
We've already dealt with all sorts of tech shenanigans because Google Hangouts does not seem to like evenings. We're still trying to sort things out, but we're going to roll with it as we do. As a bit of a filler segment, since it's conveniently scheduled chronologically, we are going to talk about Brooklyn Book Festival, because most of us
You were
actually made
there.
it last weekend.
Even I went, and I'm a recluse.
Yeah, the stars magically aligned, and three of us managed to make it. So,
Oh.
Not me.
yeah, we were going to kidnap you, but it was a little out of our way.
It was kind of in the opposite direction.
Only by about 2 hours. Never mind that it takes like 2 hours to get from here to there. Or here to Brooklyn, I should say.
Also, CJ managed to get on the wrong train both times, on the way there and on the way back.
I'm talented.
That sounds like something CJ would do.
But yes, despite all sorts of complications and miscommunications and other such shenanigans, some of us managed to make it there, and I'd like to think that we all had fun, but I can't really speak for the others. I had fun.
I had a blast.
I bet you did.
I suggest that we go through the highlights of Brooklyn Book Festival, what people thought of it, for better or worse, and if your stuff is conveniently not being taken by the police, we can do a book haul.
Hopefully my apartment is not on fire. Okay, fire truck's going. We're good.
Excellent.
But yes, I have all my stuff here.
I nominate Kelvin to go first then.
Book haul or just thoughts?
How
All
about
the things.
you can choose which one you do first?
All right. I guess I'll start with thoughts. It was actually a pretty cool festival. One of which I had no idea existed until very recently, which is kind of sad because of the three of us, two of us don't actually live in the town that this event took place. Go figure. And the two of them knew about it, and I didn't. But I made up for that this past weekend, and it wasn't quite as overwhelming as Book Expo America, which is probably kind of a good thing.
I feel like the fact that it was outdoors helped immensely.
And the fact that the weather played nice, relatively.
That too. Good weather, lots of vendors, like a ton of things to do, and panels to go check out, which we only caught one of them. I think we only had, that was as much energy as we had to for panels, seeing as all the vendors we ended up browsing through. And as with any good festival / convention that involves purchasing things, I set myself a good budget to buy things and blew through it within an hour and a half. But along the way, spending all of my money, I did meet quite a few really awesome authors, vendors, very various interesting people, very creative people too. I think my two favorite were chatting with the author Dennis Gray.
Oh, we have
I
a
do
new
believe
guest.
we have a guest here.
Hey, it worked.
Yeah, here I am. Finally.
Hooray.
I'm sorry. I don't know what took so long. It kept not accepting my password.
It seems like Google Hangouts doesn't like the nighttime for some reason. It's usually not this finicky. We were just doing a quick run-through of our thoughts on Brooklyn Book Festival, because some of us were able to attend.
Oh, how was it?
We enjoyed it. We had a lot of
Quite
fun.
a good time.
Yeah.
I think the National Coalition Against Censorship had a booth there.
I think so.
Mm-hmm. I think they were planning to be there.
I don't remember offhand if we saw them, but yeah, like I was saying, the author Dennis Gray. It was a lot of fun talking to him about his books and talking about jazz as well. Jazz is something that's very near and dear to my heart, and so
I love jazz too.
excellent. And so looking at a couple of the books he's written, it definitely got my attention, and I decided to buy his. I believe this was his latest book, Black Love Notes. And so it's set in the 1940s. It's about a jazz pianist, and I'll go over the synopsis real quick. Well, the first paragraph anyway. Mordecai Jefferson is a young, dynamic 1940s jazz musician who carries his piano on his back. He hears music every second of the day and enjoys playing for his lover and biggest fan in Waste City, Alabama, Dolores Bonet. To Mordecai, he and Dolores are like black love notes on a musical page. But all of that is about to change the day he hears a recording of up-and-coming Harlem jazz trumpeter Bunny Greensleeves. If he wants to make a name for himself, Mordecai needs to find a way out of Alabama into the jazz capital of the world. So definitely looking forward to reading that one.
That's great.
Now that we actually have our special guest on, I'm going to give us the 15-minute time limit to do Brooklyn Book Festival, book haul, and observations. So at 7:30, we'll dive right into the interview.
Okay.
That way we don't have to start one segment, stop it, and shuffle things around like a bad deck of cards. Knowing me, I'd have all the cards on the ground within a couple of seconds anyway.
Yeah.
But continue, Calvin.
All right. I shall continue my book haul. I'm going to make this quick. Well, quick-ish. I've got A Vacation on the Island of Boyfriends by Stacy Beerline. We got this from the I believe this was the Elephant Rock table.
Sounds about right.
And they gave this one. They gave this one out. They were giving this one out, so hard to say no to a free book, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. We've got a couple of back issues of one story booklets, which are a series of excuse me, short stories of various genres. If you notice the symbol on this compilation here, this was the one that denoted humor.
I actually went ahead and subscribed to them for a year I think they're doing like a 10 for $10 deal for
Ah,
like 10 little pamphlets. So I'll be looking forward to flipping through those and sharing them on the podcast when I eventually get them.
let's see. I also got What to Charge: Pricing Strategies for Freelancers and Consultants by Laurie Lewis. Seeing as how I am a freelance web designer, I figured this would be of great interest to me, especially seeing as how um, prices and things are always something that is, well, that's one of the most important things besides getting the work done itself. Oh, that's right. I also got Benny's Last Blast. This is another book by Dennis Gray. This was one of his short novels. He gave this to me along with Black Love Notes, and also, let's see, do I have the CD on me? Yes, I do. The spoken word version of Black Love Notes. This is an abridged version, the original version of Black Love Notes before he expanded on it, and it's set to various jazz tunes.
I'm intrigued as to how that's going to sound.
As am I, as am I. All right, I got The Writer's Afterlife by Richard Vetter. Vetter, sorry. I'm gonna read very quickly one of the author synopsises that one of the an author that read this book gave. It's an original, hilarious, and poignant tale of second chances, the role that fate plays in our lives, and the triumph of the creative spirit. Tom Chillo is a hero with heart. You will root for him as he reaches for the brass ring and learns to live life with gusto. Bravo. This book I'm definitely looking forward to reading, Geek Sublime by Vikram Chandra. Beauty of the Code of Beauty.
I have a copy of that as well.
A mixture of coding and philosophy. One of those I'm well versed in. Hopefully I can keep up with the second one. And finally, I got a T-shirt from the from the Novelty Company. Novelty is a company that makes literary-based T-shirts, and so I purchased their. Let's see if we'll be able to see it. A Poe-a-Tree T-shirt. I thought this was very clever, and I'm going to enjoy this immensely. And that is my haul.
Nice. And what did Justin think of the whole day? You're muted.
Thanks. Yeah, I found it actually really fun. There was a whole lot of history, music, several booths of political charge novels. The only thing is there is, I would say there's probably a lot more nonfiction than there was fiction there. At least the booths that I visited. But it was incredibly fun, and I got a lot out of it, talked to a lot of people. I started out trying to go to every single booth and introduce myself and talk to everybody, but I found out that authors can be just as socially awkward as people coming up to their booths so it was kind of hard to strum up conversation sometimes, and it was taking a little longer than I thought it would. So I ended up having to curt that and just go kind of where I was interested in specifically. And that was really fun. Talked to a lot of people. I didn't actually purchase anything, but I collected a lot of information so that I can make purchases later. And I'll probably do a post book festival haul at another point once I get all the things that I plan on buying.
Fair enough. Let's see. As for myself, I did purchase things, many things. I did still stay within my budget though.
Which one of us did?
Yeah. I also ended up with a book from Dennis Gray. I got Teardrop because that one looked interesting to me. We might have to swap books at some point, Calvin.
Yeah, no problem.
Also got a copy of Benchwoman by Howard Sterenbach. As the business card falls out. I also got Song of the Shank by Jeffrey Renard Allen, or Allen, because I have to go to Grey Wolf Press booth whenever I see them because they're very entertaining. And I also got a copy of Geek Sublime and also a copy of A Vacation on the Island of Ex-Boyfriends, but we've already seen that on the screen, so... The other book I got was Demons in the TV by Christopher Paul. Just a collection of weird short stories that piqued my interest. A couple free issues of Asimov's, because you can't say no to free copies of Asimov's. I also got 2 copies of Poets and Writers, but that's at the office at the moment for my lunchtime reading.
Nice.
And Calvin was a bad influence and made me get a T-shirt as well. I got the Whitman team jersey because it's hard to say no to Whitman. But in regards to like just the overall experience, this is the second time I've made it to Brooklyn Book Festival. Let's get the right event. I thought this time was a lot more fun because the first time around I just went as an attendee. I didn't have a company. I didn't have a podcast. I just thought, ooh, this sounds interesting. Let's see what it's about. This time around I could actually talk to a lot of the authors and publishers and agents and industry people, and not quite as a peer, but a little bit more in the industry than I used to be. So I could kind of talk the talk a bit easier than I used to, which makes for a lot more interesting conversations. It is a bit of a shame that we didn't make it to many or any other panels, just the one, but it was nice that we could at least catch the one, which I thought was a very interesting one overall. And maybe next time round we'll be able to get all of the communications done beforehand so we can get some recordings done of some of the panels, or even get some photos of the event and maybe interview some people there. Get that up on the site for our viewers and listeners. Unfortunately, that didn't manage to happen this year, just to various complications and misunderstandings. But it happens. Overall, it was a great time, and I look forward to next year.
As am I.
Yeah, I'll definitely go again.
And maybe next time around we can kidnap Will and Ed, even if they are 2 hours in the opposite direction.
That would be fun.
Well, that's what the
not
train
good
is for.
Not so good for my bank account, but...
All right. With that, let's get into the interview because we have Pat Scales on. Hooray!
Hi.
Now, you are a retired librarian or still active librarian?
I'm a retired librarian. Yes. I spent 37 years with middle schoolers and high school kids. I retired from a high school for the arts, but most of my career was at a middle school.
That must have been a lot of fun, but you must have had a lot of patience as well, I imagine.
Well, you know, you have to love 13-year-olds or you couldn't work with them. I actually love them. So they need somebody to love them. 13. But the literature available to them is just so fabulous compared to, you know, what I grew up on. So it was fun to connect the books and the kids.
Yeah, I can only imagine the differences even between now and when I was in high school, just the options available to them.
Yeah, it's huge, and of course we probably have far more censorship problems now than we did certainly than in my day. I never heard about censorship. It may have gone on, and we just didn't know it. But we hear about a lot now, and actually, there's a big case going on in Texas right now, and some parents, two mothers, are actually trying to mobilize the community in support of the books. So that's when it's great. It's when people will act in such a proactive way. So we're pulling for them.
Yeah, it's good to hear when parents are actually pulling for the books, not against them.
Yeah, well, you know, the way I got involved in intellectual freedom in the first place was way back in the early 80s. I started a parent literature group at a middle school, and it never dawned on me that you know, they might question a book, which they never did, and I didn't start the group to promote intellectual freedom. I started it because I thought it would be a good idea for parents and kids to have a book to engage in conversation about, because I had remembered so much from my own childhood. That was the connection my dad and I had. He was a great reader, and he would just read and hand me what he was reading, and we would talk about him. And that's the kind of culture I wanted to create in the middle school where I was. And the next thing I knew, someone asked me to write an article about the program, which I did, and Judy Blume discovered it, and the article, and asked me if my program could be a prototype for the Kids Fund that she was setting up at the time. So I kind of crossed this nation talking about parent literature groups, and as a result, we never had a question. And I think parents fear the unknown. And once you open up and just talk about the issues, that for the most part will accept it. I can remember a couple of parents not wanting their kids, maybe in the group, would express that they didn't want their kids reading a certain thing, but when they would, another parent or parents would speak up and say, but I want my kids to read it. And that's what it's all about, is making those choices, but not telling someone else what they can't read. And so we never had a censorship problem in my school, ever, while I was there. There was one question over a novel being taught in a classroom, but we got that solved really quickly. It never went further than, but that was a teaching. It was not anything in the library.
Yeah, I know for me, we never really had censored or banned books. It was more parents were complaining, my son has already read this book 3 times in the last 3 years. Why does he have to read it for class again?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, we do deal a lot with books being taught in the classroom, but you know, we also deal with a lot being challenged in libraries. And this is we've been celebrating Banned Books Week now for 32 years. And since we've been tracking challenges, you know, we can see the trends. And honestly, for the most part, you know, the trends are the same: violence, profanity, sex. And what we've seen in recent years, of course, is homosexual themed books, or people complaining about those. And I think with all the same-sex marriage issues coming up, that's, you know, increased. One book that had a very volatile case in the past year is a simple little picture book called The Family Book. and it's just really teaching tolerance. You know, some families are black, some families are white, some families have grandmothers, some, you know, or whatever. And this one page, it says some families have a mother and a father, some families have two mothers or two fathers. And I was just doing a webinar last week with the guy who did that book, and he said honestly, when he wrote the book, the whole book's about tolerance. We're all alike in many ways, because at the end it says we all love hugs, you know, and those kinds of things. But he wanted to teach tolerance. But he said also the two mothers could also mean a mother and a stepmother, which in our culture is very, very likely. So, it's the parents that are the homophobic people out there that raised Cain with that book. So we do have, you know, a fair number of that right now. Another book called In My Mother's House, which was a picture book. For similar reason, there were lesbian moms that adopted 3 children, and all the 3 children were all from different cultures. And there again, it was all about tolerance and so forth. And it rarely in a picture book would it take you from childhood all the way into adulthood. But with this book, the narrator is talking about lovingly about the 2 moms, but the 2 moms are no longer living. One of the kids lives in the house they grew up in because they wanted it to be a place where they would all come. So it's just very interesting to see what people, I mean, that may be this year what causes us a lot of problems. Next year it will be something else. Yeah. And I'm looking at the top 10 most challenged books this year, and out of the top 10, 9 of them would be books for either children or young adults. Only one of them is an adult book, and that's 50 Shades of Grey. And but the number 1 most challenged book this year is Captain Underpants, which has been at the top for now several years, and it's actually included in my new book called Books Under Fire, which where I've got 34 titles. I only put in books since 2002 that we've had challenges with, because there was an old hit list that was done in 2002, so I wanted to pick up anything that had been challenged since. And oddly, well, not oddly, but it's interesting that some of the books that we've still had challenges with just in recent years came out as early as the 1970s. One example is Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. Some of you probably read it in school growing up, because it won the Newbery Medal in the 1970s. And we're still getting challenges to that book. And I think the reason we are is it's commonly taught, I think, at middle schools. And so that's why we're still getting challenges to it. But Captain Underpants represents this kind of new trend with graphic novels, and people, I mean, Captain Underpants is an alter ego for the main character, and he does things that kids would never be allowed to do in school, which is what one of the arguments would be. But my argument would be that we read books, but we want to read about things we could never get by with. I mean, they do things like, roll their skateboards over ketchup packages and spray ketchup all over the cafeteria. Well, hey, I've been there and watched. Maybe not a skateboard do it, but stomping on them plenty of times. So I think that people don't like the way, I mean, he uses bad grammar, but that's just the way it is. Kids want to read what they're not allowed to do. So Captain Underpants is keeping us busy, and it doesn't help that on the cover of the book is a boy in his jockey shorts. I often wondered if he'd put him in boxers, if it would have made a difference. It's hard to know. And of course, the Hunger Games, we knew. I mean, we've been fighting that one. Harry Potter, every single year, every time a new Harry Potter book came out, I think I was on NPR defending it. And finally, people have kind of it's fallen off now because a new one hasn't been out now.
Mm-hmm.
Ended the series, but and then the Hunger Games took over, and The Giver by Lois Lowry certainly has been challenged throughout the nation from the moment it was published, but we don't yet know if, now that the movie has just come out, whether that is going to increase the challenges. We do know that sometimes that does, like Perks of Being a Wallflower was
Mm-hmm.
of that, where we suddenly had new challenges to that book. And the book Push, which the movie Precious was based on, we had problems with after the movie came out. So, does anyone have a question?
I was actually curious about the book that you've put together and published.
I don't know if you can. It's called Books Under Fire. Can you see it?
Yep.
Okay. It's published by the American Library Association, and it's got 34 titles in it, and these are titles that are for children, up through middle school though. And we will probably now follow with one with young adults. But it would have been really a hefty volume if we had added that to this. But we wanted to start out just with the children's ones. And what I do with each entry, I put them alphabetically by writer, because we don't want to prejudice anybody by topic, you know. Mm-hmm. So we did it alphabetically by writer. I wrote a summary of each book. I highlighted, I used short quotes from reviews so that people, and gave the citation for the review if people wanted to go and find the entire review of the book. I outlined awards and accolades it's received. In some cases, that might be an award, might be a book award like Newbery or Caldecott, or a state children's book award. An accolade may be like the ALA Notables book list, or the School Library Journal's best books list, and so, or New York Times best children's books list. And then I provided the website for the writer, and all but 2 had websites, so that was amazing. Wow. Then I did something called for further reading. And so it allows you to, and sometimes I provided the URL if it was a website, and many, nowadays we can find all of these things there, about the book, about the writer, and about censorship. So if you want to go for the censoring of that particular book, if you want to go further and read more, it's there. Then I also added for viewing and listening. And because there were an amazing number of YouTube videos of some of these writers actually talking about their books. And we've started in maybe about the past 3 years doing a virtual readout for Banned Books Week. So and we have a channel on YouTube for that. So I provided videos of people reading aloud from those particular books. Then I did something, and this goes back to my work with parents, and because I feel strongly that if readers, whether they're young or whether they're older, if they look at a book as a whole, they're not as likely to judge it, kids are quite capable of focusing in on the real themes. So I provided some open-ended questions that librarians and teachers and parents can use with the young readers to help them focus on the issues. Why are people challenging this book? What do you think about this? And get them to talk about bullying, because that's certainly one of the problems we have with bullying as a big issue in some of the books that we have challenged. So get kids talking about the issues, and to use the main character to focus in on the issues that some people have problems with. And then, just by way of trends, I wanted to look at this myself, so I thought it would be interesting. I added a couple of titles at the end that have been challenged many years back, that for the same reason this book's being challenged today. And it was kind of fun for me to go back and find those, and I found out, the problems for the most part are still the same that we have problems with. Language, like as I said. And then every time we have another mass shooting in this country or whatever, we suddenly get people wanting to challenge books that deal with violence. And so I wanted to provide those links to other books that have been challenged for similar reasons. So that's in there for every single book. I've just outlined the whole entry for each book. Then I did some appendices where I thought it would be interesting for people to see classics that have been challenged and why, like Alice in Wonderland and The Wizard of Oz, and that represents, hopefully, most people's childhood. You've grown up on these. Then I also provided a list of the Newbery books that have been challenged and why, and the Newbery Honor books, and the same with Caldecott. I also provided a bibliography of books for kids that will help them understand free speech rights. And it's got fiction and nonfiction that's in the bibliography. And then I provided another bibliography of books for professionals that would help them focus on these rights. So that's the book in essence.
Sounds like you covered everything.
It was fun to work on. I mean, along about toward the end, I was going to, up half till about 2 or 3 every morning, but, it got done. So we're thrilled it's out for Banned Books Week.
How long did it take you to put the whole book together from I want to put this together all the way to it's published?
Well, I mean, I took a little break in there. So I started it really a year ago last December, but our editor retired. And so it took them about, 6 months to find another editor. So I kind of just rested on my laurels because I thought, well, what if a new editor doesn't like this format I've come up with? All this work. So I kind of just waited. And all of a sudden, last December, I got this email from this new editor that says, where's the manuscript? So I had to get myself in gear. And so that, I did it to myself because, I've known that we would be working on this for a couple of years, but I didn't finish it until March. So, and they did a quick turnaround with it because they really wanted it out for Banned Books Week. So, anyway, it's maybe the next one won't be won't be quite like that. And I was lucky that I could log in, to some of the databases at a public library to get some of the articles I needed, and I could do that from home at any hour. So that was very helpful. And it was working on it a little while to decide the exact format I wanted.
And this book is targeted primarily for librarians or the general public?
I would say anybody that cares about kids' books, teachers, librarians, parents, anyone that's doing book clubs with kids. It might be a mother-daughter, father-son, father-daughter, mother-son book clubs, which we have a lot of that going on in this nation. And I would think that it would be very helpful for them as well. It can be purchased just by going to the on the American Library Association store. You can just log in there, and I think that Barnes & Noble and Amazon has it already. I did a quick little Google on it and found it, but so I think you can get it, and some bookstores will have it. I'm doing an event tomorrow locally, and then another one in North Carolina next week.
Nice.
And they have it in their window. Someone posted it on Facebook. That's how I knew it was in the window up there. So hopefully, if nothing else, people could ask their public libraries to buy it so that they could, check it out and use it with their kids. And I just urge people that if you hear of a challenge, to let us know at the Office of Intellectual Freedom at ALA, because we do actually keep a database of challenges. If people want the challenges to remain anonymous, we recognize that, and we keep it private if that's what they want. The way I dealt with it in the book is I would just say, this book was number 4 on our most challenge list in this particular year, and I would spell out the challenges we knew, the details about. The ones that wanted to remain anonymous, I reported them, but I just said that the institutions have asked to remain anonymous. Sometimes it's because librarians are frightened by their boards, or teachers are frightened by their principals, or librarians by principals and superintendents. So they may ask our help, but they don't want it, publicized, and we're going to honor that privacy if that's what they want. But we do like to know where they are, because we can track it and know how to help others. Sometimes the office is even very good about putting people in touch with one another, like someone that's having a challenge in one state and another, we know of another case in another state, we can connect them, and it helps a lot. But I just urge everyone to be open and honest with kids, respect their intelligence. They're smart human beings that have free speech rights, and so many people feel that in schools they don't, but they do. And that has been proven by the courts.
Yeah, children are a lot more intelligent than most of us give them credit for.
That's exactly right, and they know how to express it. They can, but if knowing keeps them safer than not knowing. But unfortunately, we have a culture in this nation with some people that think that not knowing keeps them safe. I would say knowing is the greatest, assurance of safety. And the best way to learn tolerance is through books and to listen to each other's opinion. But if we don't give them a chance to voice their opinion, then they don't learn to be tolerant.
Mm.
How much do you think that books are being banned for trying to protect the children versus parents projecting their own fears and prejudices on their children and trying to, they're afraid to, face the moral and social issues of today versus just trying to protect the kid from content that might be too violent or too sexual?
I think a lot of it is a parent trying to prejudice their children. They want them to think like they do, and they don't. They just want to control their thoughts. I think they also don't know how to talk to their kids openly, and that's sad to me. And that's why I'm saying use these questions. If you can't do it on your own, here's a help right here. Know how to ask the kid about certain things. They're going to find out, whether it be in the schoolyard or in the alleyways or whatever. I remember I was in the 4th grade when somebody told me what a condom was. And, I wasn't quite sure what you did with it. It's probably at the time, but I remember it was a neighbor, a girl my same age that told me. And so kids are going to hear it. And I would say to those parents who want to be overprotective, the best thing to do is talk openly about it. Let them hear it from you, and let's talk about these things. But no, I think a lot of it is they want to prejudice them and bring their own views to it. And I understand that adults as a whole have a hard time with that, because you want to feel like you're moving the kid into the right answer. But what is the right answer? And I think the other thing too is we have a lot of political agendas going on in this nation, and a lot of parents react to those agendas and want to bring it to the books that kids are reading. And
that's probably why only the popular books seem to be getting banned, like your 50 Shades of Grey and your Harry Potters and. Mm-hmm. And not, because I'm sure there's many, many, many worse books that your kid is probably picking up and reading that you have no idea about, that you don't ban because it's not in the current, social zeitgeist.
Yeah. Well, one of the problems we're having as well is there are several websites out there that are actually targeting books for their content, and they label them like they give them X number of bombs for violence, lips for sex, the number signs for language, and there are two sites doing that we know of, and another one that's ranking them based on using a graph, like 1 through 6 for profanity or whatever. But if you read some of what they're doing, it's really, I mean, if it wasn't so sad and scary, it would be comical, because like there's this fabulous book called Heart of a Shepherd, and it's set in Montana, I think, on a ranch, and the boy's father's in Iraq, and the boy is left, to help out on the ranch, and one of the sheep has a lamb. Well, this one site gave them like 3 lips for sex because a lamb was born to the sheep. So a lot of parents are reading this thing, and they don't understand, it must be a lot of sex in this book. And that they're not reading the books, and they're not trusting their kids.
Do you feel like... Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, that seems unnecessarily subjective and not
is.
very rational.
Well, it's not that different from our current movie rating system. And, it came about trying to inform parents, but as every system, especially one controlled by a governing body, becomes slowly corrupt and highly subjective and pushing their own agendas, it sort of, it sort of hurt the movie industry, this rating boards. Everyone's trying to get a PG-13 rating because that's the most popular. That's where the parents are just going to let their kids run about. And, it's just one F word away from going from an R to a PG-13. And that seems like an odd jump. So I don't necessarily have a problem with informing parents about content, because I don't know if different forms of media should be treated all that differently. But
well, the difference is that the MPAA ratings are done by the movie industry themselves. And not that I necessarily like those ratings, but they are done by the Motion Picture Association, and all of those, the movie people belong to that, where books are all done by different companies and different writers, and it is very subjective. And I do have a problem with them labeling such content, because if you've got a bully, he's probably not going to say, oh, doggone it. And the kids are smart enough to understand that. They know the villains in a book, and they know that that's the kind of what kind of language they may use, or that they may take their fist to their face, because that's what bullies do. And so I think we just need to use them as talking points. And as far as the MPAA ratings, I'm told by kids they don't even want to go to the PG-13 movies. The whole thing now is in these multiplex, they can get into any movie they want to see. You just buy a ticket for one and go into a different theater.
Mm-hmm. Kids will always find a way around it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's a similar situation with video games and the ESRB ratings.
Right.
Kids will find a way to get around the higher ratings that need parents' permission or acknowledgement. And a lot of those are about as subjective as the movie ratings are nowadays, but they're similarly governed compared to the books.
I think another challenge with books and video games fall under this category as well is that movies are extremely easy to digest the first time and say, okay, I've counted the number of F-bombs and I've counted the number of decapitations and I've now rated this an R. It only takes an hour and a half to go through that. A book and even video games, some of them can take 10, 20 hours to play. And somebody who's trying to do something objectively and trying to pump out as many of these ratings as possible is going to have a really hard time trying to rate every single book that comes through the door, because there's just such a massive volume of it that it's almost impossible to try to put a rating on all that, which I think is actually good because I don't necessarily want ratings on everything.
Well, and we have professional reviewers. We have all kinds of review journals for books, also for video games. And if they felt that the language was not needed, they would call it out. I mean, if it's needed, it's needed. And if it's needed to define character, for instance, or for instance, a book set, and during the Vietnam War, got all kinds of bombs for violence. Well, sure it would. A war is violent.
Right, context.
Context is what's important. I can think of a fabulous book on the American Revolution, which got 4 bombs for violence. And, well, sure, it would be, but that's the nature of war. And do we want kids not understanding that? That's my point with it, because if you sit down and you're given a prescribed, count every 4-letter word or count every act of violence, and then you assign these numbers to it, you're not teaching kids to read literature and to see it as a whole. And it's important to see it as a whole. The other issue I would like to make in regard to literature, even versus movies, although I would just assume that ratings not be on movies, but
that was a question I had too. So
yeah. Well, a movie is happening before your eyes. In a work of literature, when a child reads it, that you and I could read the same scene a child is reading, and we could see it differently than they would. And this is what's happening with these people with the ratings. Kids bring to reading their own life skill, experiences. So they may read a scene that set on that Montana ranch and not see anything, and you and I would, or clearly some adult reading it, saw it differently. There's not even an act of sex in it between the animals. It's just a lamb is born and it got lips for sex. So that's how ridiculous it gets. And so the people that are actually doing these reviews are not really reviewers. They're not children's lit people. They, for the most part, have not even worked with kids. And I have very careful at some of the bios, and it's just nothing there. And so I think I think kids are smarter than we are about a lot of things. And I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that kids will not read the same thing into scenes that you and I would, because we have more life experience.
Maybe that's subconsciously our fears and why we don't want them to read certain books, because we see certain things into it because we've experienced more, and we're afraid that they're going to inadvertently perceive the same things, even if they necessarily won't, or most likely won't, because they're a little more innocent, or they don't have some of the jaded or slanted views that adults have. It's just hard to have a rational conversation about that between adults and kids for some odd reason.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's been a proper scientific study done on this, but there's lots of examples out there where adults look at something that's controversial or they deem controversial and they see something horrible in it. Like back when metal music was gaining popularity, and this song is about the devil, blah de blah. Meanwhile, that wasn't the intended reason behind that song. The lyrics were not intended for that. If someone wants to perceive something bad, it's easier to read between the lines whatever you want to see or what you want to believe compared to what's actually there.
Well, I can give you an example if we have a moment. I don't know how we do time.
No, go ahead.
I can give you an example of how kids don't see the same things adults do. In the 1970s, a picture book came out, and some of you're all so much younger than I am. You might remember it, Sylvester and the Magic Pebble, and it won the Caldecott Medal in the late 1970s, I think. Well, all of the animals, it's all animals, and of course Sylvester is a donkey. and Sylvester turns into a rock in the book, and he has a magic pebble, and the magic pebble must be on that rock for him to turn back into a donkey. But of course, the magic pebble's not on the rock, so Sylvester's missing, and the parents go looking, and they go to the police station, and the policemen happen to be pigs. I mean, all of the characters in the book are animals, but those policemen happen to be pigs. Well, the year that book came out, all heck broke loose because it was at a time when, there were so many protests and marches in this country and police brutality, and police were being called pigs. Well, the kids didn't necessarily know that, but adults did. So that passed. Years later, nobody even thought about the pig policeman anymore. And then in the 80s, when we went through another phase in this country where the word imagination was wrong. Kids shouldn't be using their imagination. It went against a lot of people's Christian beliefs. And so we had another challenge to Sylvester and the Magic Pebble. And this time it was because Sylvester turned into a rock. And the adults that challenged it said that meant Sylvester was having an out-of-body experience. Well, I shared that with kids. I have shared that with kids before. And you know what they said back to me? What's an out-of-body experience? And I said, well, I don't know. I've never had one, So that is a perfect example, the most perfect example I could think of for actually two different kind of movements in this country, so to speak, that have caused problems with the same book for different reasons. And also, in each case, it was adults looking into things that kids did not see. And even the kids that might have noticed the policemen were pigs, I don't think they got the reference, though. You could say, "Well, did you notice what animal the policemen are?" And they might say pigs, but they didn't get the reference. So it's our own sensitivities to things, and then we bring it to kids.
Now I kind of want to read that book just to see why they tried to interpret it that way.
Well, you should get it and read it. It's very much out there. It was a Caldecott winner for its illustrations. So, we never know where people are coming from. And now with the internet, I mean, it's both our friend and our foe. We can track things a lot better, but also people are going to these sites and coming up with a list of books that somebody else is saying kids shouldn't read, and they just repost them, and they never read them themselves. And, the sites come and go, and we kind of try as much as we can to keep up with some of these sites so that we can see what they're saying. And in one case, I noted there was a group in Virginia called Parents Against Bad Books in Schools, and they're kind of not very active now, but the website's still up there, but nothing's changed on it in a very long time, so I think people have just lost interest. But for a while, the same list of books that they would put up was showing up on other websites, and they had the identical misspelled words. There's a fabulous book that was actually, we won a censorship, court case on this, Anioma Mine in Kansas back in the 90s. And the writer was Nancy Gordon, and on all of these websites, they had her listed as Nancy Gordon. On all of not the ones that are labeling, but other websites that were like Cabas and some of the others. And so they were just cutting and pasting, from one another's websites. And so, those have given us problems locally throughout the nation. But it's just what we just have to deal with now. And it keeps us busy.
it's not dissimilar to calling somebody a witch and then everyone else is suddenly convinced that they're a witch just
That's
because
right.
this one person said.
I know sometimes I think we're back in the days of the Salem witch trials. I think I do want to make the point that parents do have the right to choose for their own child, but they don't have a right to choose for someone else's child. And and I can remember back, way back when Judy Blume's "Are You There, God, It's Me, Margaret" first came out, and I had this 6th grade girl that constantly, every time a kid would ask me for the book, and that book, I had about 10 hardback copies of that book. It was just circulating like you wouldn't believe. And every time a girl would ask for the book, there was this one kid in the class that would say, "My mom doesn't want me to read that book." Finally, I turned to her one day in front of the other child, and I said, "That is fine. You know, that is between you and your mom. That is your choice or her choice. But Amy's mother wants her to read it." And I never had any more problems. And that, to me, is a lesson in intellectual freedom. Yes, you do have the right to reject. Intellectual freedom is about rejecting as much as it is about, accepting. And so what one person's mom wants them to read, somebody else's may not. And that's between the parent and child.
I was surprisingly...
I said libraries need to be open, though, so that libraries need to have a wide range of materials because so that we can satisfy all these families.
Right. I think one thing that's a huge taboo subject in this country is talking about parenting and foisting, parental rules and trying to figure out, what's good for kids these days. And there's a lot of, there's a lot of problems that happen because of bad parenting. And as a society, I feel like we're really afraid to even approach that subject and talk about parenting. Because everyone, don't tell me how to raise my kid. And, there's this whole, new wave of, not hitting your kids, not even spanking them. We're learning a lot more about how that affects kids in adult life. And I think one of the things that, parenting is hard, and some parents don't want to go through the efforts of teaching their kids lessons from books. When I was growing up, I actually got into extremely violent, dark literature very early on. Like, I was reading, not R.L. Stine's, the Fear Street, not the light Goosebumps stuff. I was reading, like, really dark stuff in elementary school. And by the time I was in 5th grade, I was already starting to read Stephen King. But my parents and we talked about it, and I went to therapy at one point because I started writing about some of this type of stuff. I actually ended up in some weird therapy thing within the school. And then, after talking to everybody, everyone's like, "Oh, this guy's fine. Don't worry about it." And I feel like that if parents, talk to their kids more and, actually engage with them on a regular basis and help them, learn, right from wrong, that we wouldn't have as many problems as we do today.
That's right. And the thing is, kids are exposed to all kinds of kids in school. And we want them to learn. I tell people when we read, or when kids read, it's not always to see themselves, but also to understand others. And that's what I would like to see books do. And you may see yourself in a particular novel, and I may not see myself at all. So it may be a window to me, but it's a mirror to you. Or within a given novel, it could be both a mirror and a window to a reader, depending on the situation. And I think sometimes parents worry that if kids read what they might consider edgy topics, that people will be judging them based on what their kids are reading. And or they shouldn't be judging them on that. And what I used to tell the parents from my parent literature group was a child that's been abused at home is not likely to read a book on child abuse. They already know how bad it is. It's going to be their friends. If they know they're being, their friends being abused, then the friend may want to read about it to understand it. And that's how you develop empathy and sympathy, both. In if we don't ever expose them to these things, then they're going to grow up to be unfeeling kinds of people. And as regard you're reading R.L. Stine, I mean, kids have gone way through that, trend. And I can remember, when I couldn't keep R.L. Stine in the library. But again, trends, they're trends, and they grow out of it at some point, for the most part. And how many adults do we know that read Stephen King? Yeah.
Yeah, I always had a fascination and an interest in, darker subjects and how people deal with those subjects emotionally, and that was what always gripped me, and bringing me back to some of the more psychological horror, more than just, big scary guy cutting people up. I was more interested in the psychological horror to try to get and understand my own empathy and other people's empathy, and how, how people's emotions play off each other during extremely stressful situations. And that was something that I was trying to learn. And that was my way of exposing myself to those situations in a safe way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I went through a similar route through school, but I went through the fantasy route.
Oh,
so rather than going the scary or psychological, I went through the what if or beyond the normal type of books and mindset, and I got through the same types of issues of, oh, he's not really paying attention to the real world stuff, or whenever he has to write a story, it's not realistic. Well, you give me a story and you ask me to write a what if scenario, why do I need to do it in real life?
Right. Mm-hmm.
But I understand real versus fantasy perfectly fine. I may make fun of it from time to time, actually more often than not. But
right, and I always knew the difference between reality and what I was consuming in literature. And I knew that it was a big deal, and that death was a big deal, and, murder and sex and violence and all of that. And even at the age of, 12 or 13, when I was really getting exposed to this stuff, I knew that I wasn't interested in participating in any of these, acts. And it was purely for educational purposes, and I could distance myself from that. Mm-hmm. If anything, I got kicks maybe, in a similar sense of going on a roller coaster and, getting my heart pounding and stuff like that. Maybe, that sort of physical manifestation of what I was reading was something that I enjoyed as well. But I did it out of reading. I never went and, tortured animals or did any weird things growing up. So yeah. I think good parenting can guide children through a whole lot more than parents give themselves credit for.
I agree.
Mm. We actually had some user-submitted questions for you, if you'd like to give those a shot. You kind of touched on this one earlier, but one of our viewers asked, what is the most common reason that books get banned or challenged?
Probably sex or sexual content and profanity. And bear in mind that when I say sex or sexual content, sometimes that's used loosely. I mean, what, as I described with The Heart of a Shepherd, to some people that's sex, to others it's something else. We get a lot of challenges to some nonfiction works, like It's Perfectly Normal by Roby Harris, where that book was written for sex education purposes to use with kids at the right. It covers a wide span of information that for a parent to use at the age-appropriate time to use each section. And we got a lot of questions to that. And that, for the most part, and violence, when I mentioned this earlier, but when we have another violent act in this, country, we tend to get a lot of questions about violence then. Not as much, maybe, outside of those incidences.
It doesn't surprise me that sexuality and sex is one of the most often banned things. With sexual topics comes a whole lot of insecurity,
That's right.
and that insecurity gets projected very quickly onto everybody else around people. So that doesn't shock me at all.
Yeah. And sometimes, I think it's organized groups. We had a case a couple of years ago in Texas at a public library where a child checked out a book called My Mom's Having a Baby, and it was in the 600 sections where it should have been in the children's room. And a babysitter brought these kids to the library, and I think it was a setup, actually, because a 9-year-old girl was browsing the shelves and checked out the book. And then when they got in the car coming home, I actually saw a news segment this woman was on, the babysitter was on, and she said little girl said it was disgustifying. Well, I don't think a 9-year-old would use that word. I think that's almost baby talk. It's not. I think it was a setup because the parents never came forward. The parents never filed a challenge with that library. It was the babysitter. And she was a little bit too slick. When I saw the news segment with her, you can almost tell when they've rehearsed this. So, it's organized groups. We had a case out in Arkansas that's been a number of years ago now, but where a woman actually used keyword searches because all these card catalogs are remote now, even in schools, and she typed in the word sex, anything that came up, she challenged it in the schools. She didn't even have a child in the schools. And finally, a group of citizens, parents, and other citizens in the community rose up and kind of attacked the school board, and all the books were retained. So, yeah, but I would say sex is probably the number one, and maybe profanity, offensive language of any type. But if you look at some of the websites I had referred to, offensive language may be something like, "Oh, you're an idiot." That's the kind of thing they would call out as being offensive language. Well, yeah, we don't encourage kids to call people idiots, but you know what? People do, and in
worse.
character in the book, that's who the character is. And you help them know, how do you define character? We want to teach them from an early age, how do you do a character sketch? And sometimes it's their actions and it's their words that help to define who they are in that book. It doesn't mean we have to emulate them. It doesn't mean we have to hold them up as heroes. I don't know if that answers the question, but...
Oh, yeah, it does, definitely. Kind of the follow-up question to that was, what's the process for getting a book unchallenged or kind of removed from a challenged list?
Well, you don't ever remove them from a challenge list once they're on there, but if you're in a school district where a book has... Well, maybe this is a good time for me to make it clear the difference between a challenge and an outright ban, because that's the reason we call this banned and challenged. In my book, it's banned and challenged books. A challenge is a question. Someone has a complaint that will come to a school or a public library, and they'll make a formal complaint. When a school board or a public library board or ever how the selection policy is set up votes to remove that book, then that's an outright ban. But a challenge is not a ban. And if a selection policy is written properly, and we have various, ways these things are written, but a book should remain in circulation in a library until a decision is made. It should remain being taught in a classroom until a decision is made. And yes, we've lost a few, and we keep plugging away at that. But if you're in a community where things have happened like this, you can always go to them and say, this book needs They put back on the shelf. It can be overturned by a local school board or by a local library board, but once it goes on our list, it's there. And what we will do is we will put, if it ever got overturned, we would certainly note that. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and it's also useful to have the clarification of challenge versus ban, because even I was getting confused while doing my research on it. So.
Yeah. It's a hard concept for people to understand, and people kind of just panic when you get a challenge. And sometimes, challenges, if libraries follow the proper procedure that is set up in selection policies or in reconsideration policies, 9 times out of 10 we don't lose the material. I mean, if it's allowed to go through the proper process. I dealt with a school librarian in a northeastern state several years ago over the book In Tango Mix 3. And of course that book was on our top 10 for a long time. It's no longer on the top 10, but it's been replaced with similar books. But anyway, she kept not wanting that to go through process. I don't know if she was worried that it was she would not win the case. It actually occurred in Massachusetts, of all places, because weren't they one of the first states to legalize gay marriage? But anyway, she finally let it go to process. I kept saying, tell the person they have to fill out a form. There is a form you have to complete. Tell them they have to do that. Just allow them to do that. And then let the process, that's why you have a process. Well, when she finally let it go to process, it was after a year and a half later, she finally let it go to process and said to the mother that was causing the problem, you must complete this form for us to hear it, for it to go to committee. The book was retained. The committee voted to retain the book. So, sometimes process can really work. That's why we have a process. And that's why we maintain an office in Chicago to help librarians and help teachers and help administrators work through all of this.
It's definitely a worthwhile endeavor.
Keeps us busy daily.
I can imagine. We only had one more question submitted by a viewer, but I kind of want to open this one up to the whole group, kind of as a discussion topic. The question was, does a book getting banned result in it losing readership or increasing it? And we can expand that to challenge books as well.
It just about always expands the readership. There was a book several years ago that was banned in Brooklyn, or challenged in Brooklyn and ultimately banned. But it was a picture book, and the editor of that book told me that book probably would never have sold maybe but one printing, and it went so many printings after that. So I think once a book is challenged, and now things can go viral very, very quickly, over the internet and through newspaper outlets, and we had another case. It was the Higher Power of Lucky that won the Newbery Medal several years ago, and there was a listserv where you have to belong to the listserv, and a librarian, actually in Colorado, asked, right at the beginning of the book, the girl says she overhears 2 men talking on the other side of a privacy fence, and one says that his dog got bitten on the scrotum by a rattlesnake. Well, somehow the New York Times picked it up. It was in every newspaper in the nation. Would you let your kids read this? And I interviewed every single day that week that all of that hit. And finally, on the last day, I mean, I can tell you kids read that book like you wouldn't believe. And the last thing I did that week was an interview with NPR out in California, and the writer was there. She's from California. And she was in the studio, and there was a little girl that came on, and while we were talking, and the interviewer said to the little girl called in to tell Susan Patrone, the writer, how much she loved the book, and the little girl said, they asked the little girl, well, did you know what scrotum? Did you know what scrotum was? And she said, not at the beginning of the book, but at the end I did. And that told me the child understood the book, because the kid in the book does not know what a scrotum is. And she doesn't have a mother. She has kind of a legal guardian. And she keeps wanting a mother all the way through this book. And finally, at the end of the book, when it becomes clear that Bridget is going to become her, new mother, she turns to Bridget and says, by the way, what does scrotum mean? And so it's kind of a journey from not having anyone you could talk to and ask those questions of, to all of a sudden having someone at the end. So what it proved at the end is, hey, you can be my mother, and you can answer those questions. And the little girl on the interview just was very matter-of-fact about it. And so it was the adults raising Cain about this. It wasn't, the kids were reading the book and not even laughing. They didn't even, they just took it for what it is. We teach the anatomy in school, or we should be.
Hopefully we still are.
Yeah, hopefully we are.
Yeah, I feel like half the time I read a controversial book, it's mostly to see what's all the fuss about. Is it really as horrifying as the media is making it out to be? And so far, any book I've read in that scenario, I don't see what the fuss is about.
Well, and it's human nature to want to read what someone is telling you should be reading, right? I mean, it's like wanting to go to a movie that somebody says is restricted. Every generation has their book that somebody's going to tell you. When I was in high school, it was Peyton Place, and that dates me. But we were all passing it around dog-eared. And,
Yeah, I remember growing up the Anarchist's Cookbook, which
yes.
I'm not sure was ever actually published as a legitimate novel. I think it was more of at least at the time when I was growing up, it was more circulated on the early days of the internet and circulated, person to person, and and everyone had a copy of it because it was cool to have a copy of it, but no one had any intention of doing anything in that book. It was all very trivial stuff that most of us knew anyways, like,
yeah.
Oh, how do you make a bomb? Okay, you put some chemicals together, whatever. And we were shooting off fireworks into each other's faces, long before that book came out. So yeah, and I didn't, really care about the book all that much until it was legitimately banned in several places. And I'm like, all right, what's the big deal? And then I read it, and I'm like, all right, I guess I don't care that much. So yeah, banning a book can definitely legitimize it for a wider audience.
Yeah. I will admit to obtaining my copy of that through IRC back when that was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And most of my reaction was, I can see how this would end badly, but who's really going to bother doing all of this? But that was back when I was a little more young and naive.
The topic reminds me of one of those episodes of South Park where I think they hit the nail on the head. They gave them all, it was right after Catcher in the Rye came off the banned books list, and I had all the kids read it, and when the kids were like, this was banned? Well, now we gotta read it to see why. And even Eric Cartman, who hates doing reading and schoolwork, read cover to cover on the book to see what was so controversial about it. And in the end, they were all pissed off because it was nothing. It's like, oh, we're just a couple swears. Whatever. No big deal. Why was this banned? But because it had been banned, they all wanted to read it.
I can tell you a very funny Catcher in the Rye story if you want to end on a really funny note.
Yeah, by all means.
When I first moved here, a friend was telling me that several years back, there was a group in town that wanted to, trying to ban a number of books, Catcher in the Rye being one of them. And so they wanted the newspaper to list all of the reasons why, like pull passages out and literally put it in the newspaper. They wouldn't do that, but what they did is, for an example of this, look on page whatever. So on Catcher in the Rye, it said, for an example of oral sex, look on page, I don't remember the page, 16 or something, Catcher in the Rye. And so this friend of mine, who was an English professor, said he couldn't remember oral sex in that book. So he ran to get his copy of Catcher in the Rye and turned to that page, and the passage read, "Kiss my ass." And that was oral sex to these people. So that's how ridiculous.
That's beyond disconcerting if that's their perspective on that.
But, this was probably late 60s, early 1970s. But it's, I used to I told this story to a publisher in New York, and to a guy that used to always make me stand up at all the cocktail parties and tell that story because he thought it was so funny. And it is, but that's how ridiculous it's how people read into these things. And Catcher in the Rye is still a beloved book today. And
well, I am one of those atrocious people that has read it several times, mainly for school, but I don't care for it. I don't think it's that impressive, but I don't want it banned. I don't want it challenged. I just
groundbreaking book. Yeah, it was definitely groundbreaking.
I appreciate it for the style and what it does, but don't make me read it again. Does anyone have some last-minute wrap-up comments on this topic, or shall we migrate to the next segment? All right. You have been given your chance. Onwards to the rest of the show. Let's see here. For the highlights reel this week, we have the tabs that I have not pulled up in advance because I did not think to do it in advance. But let's quickly do this because we got to switch things over, of course, and then we hop onto screen share. Wait for it to load. All right, we have two highlights for this week's episode. We have the Brooklyn Book Festival's YouTube channel, which unfortunately is not updated as often as I would like. It's mainly once a year. But from there, you can kind of expand to other organizations that had press access each year and post up their recordings of some of the speaking events and just the general goings-on. I didn't want to do a list of a dozen different YouTube channels to show all the craziness that you may have either experienced or missed on Sunday. I am hoping next year we will be able to highlight our own recordings of that event. Cross your fingers that we can pull that off. And the other one, which did not pull up in time, so you get a behind-the-scenes peek of the show notes. Banned Books Week, their website, because it's still going on until the 27th, which I believe is Sunday. Or Saturday. I forget offhand which day, but until the weekend. If you haven't kind of gotten the point yet from this episode and some of the other things we've talked about this week, it is Banned Books Week, and it is worth noting and delving a little deeper into. This website has a lot of fabulous information about it and all of the other events going on out there this week. Last I checked, this episode was the only Connecticut event for the week, which was a little disappointing. Oh no, we got a new one. We have the Pequot Library is doing an event. Hooray! Good on them. But yeah, it's separated by state. If you want to check out your own location to see what's going on this week, I definitely recommend it. It's worth seeing what's out there, or just putting together your own event, going to your local library, providing your support. We don't really say it regularly or often, but support your local library and your local bookstores, either independent or even retail chain. We prefer the independents, but retail chains need their love as well. All of the links to this stuff is in our show notes on the website, fcwriters.com. Just go to episode 60. It'll be right on the homepage. And it also has the link to Pat's book on the ALA website. You can also just go to Barnes & Nobles or Amazon. I know Amazon had it posted, but I think it was still for pre-order back when I checked, but that was a week or so ago. And those are the two highlights for this week, which means it's time for our weekly writing prompts. These are still being posted on Saturday or Sunday, so these have been up for a couple days now, but we're still going to put them on the show so that our viewers and listeners out there can see our interpretations of them. If this is your first episode viewing us, welcome. Each week we do various creative prompts. We provide 10 one-liners, 10 one-worders, a combination of Rory's story cubes for the more visual prompt, and we also provide musical prompts and artistic prompts, because even writers can be multi-talented and multi-creative. All right, so we have 5 segments. We have 4 hosts. As per usual, I'll take the bottom page, so I'm just going to go down the line. Calvin gets the one-liners, Justin gets the one-worders, and Will gets the story cubes for this week. Have at it.
All right, your one-line running prompts for this week are as follows. This is the inside story of how the dragons failed. Publishing process? What's that? This is going to kill a good 3 hours of my life. This place isn't a pigsty. Pigs won't come anywhere near here. I'm a dragon, not some insipid horse with wings. You're worse than the others. No story starts with contentment and prosperity. I object to your opinion because you're stupid. Take one more step towards me and I'll break every single one of your pencils, pens, and markers. And there's a sale at the market down the street. Get your wallet because we're stocking up on ramen. That last one holds a lot of personal feelings for me.
I might have been reading the Dragon Riders of Pern that week.
Your one-word writing prompts for this week are inspired, subterranean, child, time, series, prejudice, appropriate, nocturnal, band, I feel like that's a plant, polish, and spirit. I thought these were randomly generated, CJ.
Of course they are. And I was kind of curious if you were going to go with polish or Polish on that one.
All right, so the Rory's story cubes, as best as I can interpret them, are an analog wall clock set to 4 o'clock, a ladder, what appears to be a thief making off with a box of who knows what, a pill capsule, a man either throwing or catching a ball, a cell phone, not the smartphone type, not the flip phone type either, old school there, a bowl of steaming hot food, perhaps that's the ramen, a person peeking around a wall and cupping his hands over his eyes, I think. Either that or he's covering his eyes. And a teepee Or perhaps a wigwam? Something like that. A round, conical tent.
I feel like that cell phone is going to be specifically a Nokia.
Yeah,
some reason.
it's got to be a Nokia.
All right. As for the musical prompts, we have 6 quarter notes this week. G, C, D, G, G, F. You're welcome to add sharps or flats, your own time signature to it, whatever you please. That's just what we've provided to kick things off. And as for the artistic prompt for this week, it is a cryptid beauty pageant. And for those not familiar with that particular term, a cryptid is something like the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot or mythological creatures that we can or cannot necessarily prove their existence of at the moment. And those are your creative prompts for this week. As always, if you happen to utilize any of these prompts and create your own piece, we would love to read, listen, or see it. You can send us a copy via our email address or just like the URL where we can check it out. Our email address is wordninja@fcwriters.com, conveniently posted at the bottom of each page of writing prompts. And we do enjoy reading any submission out on a future episode of the live stream. If it's an artistic prompt, we'll show it on the screen. If it's a musical prompt, presumably you'll provide us an audio file. Otherwise, if it's just the sheet music, I'm not sure how we'd handle that. We haven't figured out a process for that yet. So if you're the first one to send us sheet music, you'll get to see us flail around in circles while we figure something out. And take myself off of screen share. That way you don't see the show notes, so I can see what's next. No spoilers for you. The final segment for this episode is our weekly productivity highs and lows. This has been an evolved segment over the last 60 episodes, but this time around it's discuss 3 activities you have experienced in the last week, either positive or negative, to kind of give yourself a mindset of, well, what have I pulled off this week? Or what complications have arisen? I'll kick things off as others quickly fill theirs in. My 3 hits for this week were, we're all set officially for Kineticon 2015, 10 months in advance. That means we have a hotel, we have a vendor booth in the Artist Colony, and we have 4 badges. So we're ahead of the game for next year already. And submissions for panels are actually at the end of the month, so we're going to have to talk about that offline at some point. That's going to be fun. Another highlight for this week was I've accomplished a dozen Doom projects at my day job. Unfortunately, I've gotten another 3 dozen Doom projects in their place. So that's kind of a high and a low. And, of course, Brooklyn Book Festival, which was also a high and a low. High for being able to attend and all we experienced, but a low for not being able to record it and share it with all of our viewers and listeners out there. Such is how things went. And how about Will, since he's next on that list? Once he takes himself off mute.
I was trying to. Google wouldn't have the little... It wasn't showing me the little drop-down to actually unmute myself. Alright, so... I have actually gotten back into writing for Roommate.
Yay.
The key! Real paper.
Nice.
I remembered that I used to write on real paper with real pens, and now it's a little bit easier, better than nothing. So I'm reworking the opening scene I had written because I decided what I was going to do is a horrible, terrible, bad, don't do it idea. So I'm going in a different route. I also got some reading in, kind of a high and a low because I got the reading in at a point where our modem is, I think our router's starting to go. So we may have to look into a new wireless router, and it's causing internet connectivity issues. So during a downtime, I started reading Fuzzy Business 2 because I already finished Fuzzy Business 1. This time it's fuzzier. But one down is that my sleeping schedule is really bad, and I've been trying for weeks to fix it and flailing about horribly, staying up till past 3 a.m. in the morning and then sleeping till noon. I need to work on fixing that.
And next up is Justin, if he happens to have any not on the show notes behind the scenes.
I do. I didn't update the show notes yet. So probably the three most productivity-based things that I've gotten accomplished is I've managed to consolidate and retire all of my online social accounts. I've been basically doing a huge inventory on that. All of you here, or most of you here, have been spammed with new Facebook requests and email setups and new account links. And I apologize for that, but hopefully this will be the last time. There'll be more updates on that on another day. I took the day off on Monday, my first vacation day of the year, and I only am going to be taking 2 other ones, so it's been a little stressful, but I managed to take yesterday off and redo a whole bunch of stuff in the apartment, kind of just reorganizing my life. You know, there's so many things in the apartment that we never use. I'm putting them in the basement. Things we rarely use, I'm putting out of sight, but more easily accessible than the basement. Kind of minimalist style, trying to get everything organized and keep things clean. And third, probably a negative, is I've been fighting a little bit of a couple illnesses that seem to be overlapping, and I've been having trouble at work keeping my schedule going and keeping my inspiration up. I do feel a lot better today, so hopefully that won't be the case next week. But I am way behind on things that should have been done and way over budget. And I just got a raise, so I feel like I need to hurry up and finish those things up so that my raise can actually be deserved. And so I'm going to be working on that next week. And for every day past today.
And Calvin.
All right. This is pretty exciting. This has been like quite a positive last week and a half or so. I've gotten to edit a lot of things. Videos, photos, various things that I've not been able to pick up for one reason or another. And my queue is slowly dropping, and I'm very excited about that. Another thing that I'm excited about is that I've been picking up my guitar again after an extended period of time away from it.
Hooray.
Hopefully some music will come out of that in the not-so-distant future. And a third thing that was absolutely unprecedented, I experienced 3 straight days of 8+ hours of sleep. I've never felt so alive.
That's almost worthy of applause.
So
Hooray for recovering your sleep deficit.
Oh, it's gonna take much more than that to recover my sleep deficit, but it certainly didn't hurt.
Melatonin is a wonderful drug.
Mm. So that's it for me.
And for our viewers and listeners out there, you're more than welcome to post your own productivity successes or complications for this week, as well as if you have any follow-up comments to any of the stuff that we've discussed, by all means, post a comment on our YouTube channel. We enjoy continuing conversations. And with that, we're pretty much done with episode 60. Of course, if you want to check us out on all of our various social media accounts, it's very easy. If you're watching us, you've already found our YouTube channel. But if you're listening to us via our audio version YouTube channel, the short link is wnja.us/YouTube, or just search for Full Coverage Writers. If you want to talk to us via Twitter, it's at FCWordNinja. If you're more of a Tumblr user, it's fcwordninja.tumblr.com. And for Facebook, it's facebook.com/fullcoveragewriters. If you want to support us and our various crazy endeavors that we do, you can check out our Etsy store, which has all sorts of shiny baubles on it to entertain you. The link for that is etsy.com/shop/fullcoveragewriters. We have all of our various button and magnet designs up there. We have our little Word Ninja Writers Block Cube plushie. And we have a couple bookmark designs up there. We did not get our Banned Books Week bookmark designs up there because I realized I just forgot to send them to Ed. Shame on me. But we do have designs for those, and I need to do something about that. Maybe we can get them up before the end of the week. Yeah, if there's anything on there that catches your interest, by all means, purchase one for yourself, one for your friends, one for your family. Any and all funds go towards getting some of our various other endeavors done, like our Story Bible breakdown idea, maybe some audiobook recording for the Word Ninja book, convention attendance, of course, maybe some tech and recording upgrades. It would be nice if we weren't scattered across all of New England when doing some of these recordings, stuff like that. Every little bit helps. And if you want to talk to any of us more on a one-on-one basis, if you want to just talk to me, my personal Tumblr is fancypantswolf.tumblr.com. You can also track me down on the Fairy Tale podcast on Monday nights as Makarov, or you can just email me. The link on that is in the show notes, so go check those out. And as for the others, let's go down the line. Will, where can people track you down?
Easiest place usually just to find me is on my personal Tumblr page at darkhom.tumblr.com. DARKHOM is how you spell that. Or on the Tumblr page I have for, excuse me, for my story in progress, my roommate's a stripper.tumblr.com. Both of those, what I post, tend to be not safe for work, but if you're looking to find me, messaging me there is the best bet.
And how about Justin?
As mentioned earlier, I've been consolidating my accounts. They're not all the way done consolidating yet, so I'm going to leave promoting myself to probably next week. By the time that podcast rolls around, I will be all set, and we'll have new fun things for you guys to go to, so keep in touch for next week.
And how about Calvin?
The easiest places to find me are on Tumblr. My Tumblr is instacal.tumblr.com, or you can find me on Twitter or Instagram. My handles there are @CCWII.
And for those of you that want other options, they are all in the show notes. We're just giving you the highlights. And last, but certainly not least, is our special guest, Pat. Is there any particular location that our viewers or listeners can track you down and talk to you that you'd be willing to give out?
Yes, I'm on Facebook, which they could just put in my name, and I guess you'd have to ask for a friend request. I'm also on Instagram. I think it's under PR Scales. And on Twitter is Lamb, L-A-M-B. I've got to think about it, 918. And that's how you can reach me on Twitter.
All right. That is going to wrap up episode 60 of Word Ninjas Live. Thank you all for joining us, tuning in, listening, watching, continuing the conversations via social media. Tune in next Wednesday for episode 61. Until then, have a good week, everyone.
Yeah.
Night.
Good night.